The light was on. Now we're good to go. That's all the goodies about technology. It's just kind of like smartphones. They don't know nothing that it won't do nothing we want them to do, and they're supposed to be the smart ones. Anyhow, we're teaching this morning about Jesus and how he taught about the end time to his disciples. So let's just ask the Lord this morning to open it up to us. Lord, we ask you to open up the Word to us this morning, that we can see right through what's been written down, that we can see that what the desires of your heart was should be the desires of our heart, that we should want to be able to live a life for you and be able to go to heaven and make heaven our home. Amen. There's kind of three things we'll be talking about. One of them is do not be deceived. And that is one that is a very tricky thing. Deceive means trickery. So you have to watch for that. And the other one is kind of like when the fig tree or when the oak tree, when it starts to bud out in the spring, summer's nigh. And amongst all of that, there's still one more thing that we have to do in order to make heaven our home. We have to stay ready. So there's three parts this morning we're going to talk a little bit about. The first part is do not be deceived. And we're in Mark 13. And it's a whole lot like us. We go to church. Well, Jesus went to church too. And 13:1 says they went out of the temple. Him and his disciples had been in the temple. And, you know, if you was in church with Christ sitting right here on one of the seats, what would be on your mind? It wouldn't be things, I don't think. But when they came out in verse 2, he said they, instead of really talking spiritually to him, in verse 2 they said, you see these great buildings. You know, these great buildings were man-made, and they were great buildings. It amazes me how back then they could take a stone and cover it with gold and make it just grow and radiate in the sunshine. It was amazing, but not near as amazing as Jesus Christ. They was in the presence of Jesus Christ. And they were talking about things. And he said, you see these great buildings? There shall not be one stone upon another that's not thrown down. So, to Jesus, those things didn't really mean a whole lot. A bit more than things should mean a lot to us. You know, there's an old joke about the U-Haul behind the hearse. You're not going to see that. And if you do, it'll only go to the graveyard, and that's as far as it'll go. So we don't need to dedicate our lives to gaining things. We need to gain ground towards heaven. Have a closer walk with Jesus. And as they come out, so they set up on the Mount of Olives. So I can just picture a little bench out from the temple that they walked out and sat down in the shade. And he was talking to his disciples. He had Peter, James, John, and Andrew. And they asked him privately, tell us, when shall these things be, and what signs when all these things shall be fulfilled? Jesus answered and began to say, take heed lest any man deceive you. And the thing about Jesus Christ making his journey back to earth to get God's children, he can't tell you. He don't know. He's sitting there waiting on orders to go get my children. But the thing is, he's sitting there ready. Same as we need to be down here waiting and ready. Everything's a two-way street. So tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the signs of these things to come. And Jesus answering, take heed, let no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And now this has literally happened before, but it happens in so many underhanded ways that we don't see. If you remember Jim Jones, and you remember what I call the wacko in Waco, he said he was Jesus Christ. Well, he died. He took nobody with him. So there was a lot of people that was fooled into thinking what he said was true, but don't wait too late to figure out. There's a lot of them in Jim Jones' case, especially, there was a lot of them that figured out that this is not true. They were forced to drink that poison. And the same thing in Waco. Some people figured out that this ain't right, but the doors were locked. They couldn't get out. So, them people literally said, especially Waco, he said, I am Jesus Christ. And how anybody can be gullible enough to believe that, I can't even fathom what it would be like to think you could believe that. But he goes on, and he's talking about things that I've heard all my life, and it went on way before I was ever born. It says, when you shall see or shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. There's been wars back in his days, not just in mine. When I was born, we just coming out of a World War II. But said, don't be troubled. Such things must need be, but the end is not yet. And we hear about wars and rumors of wars, and guess what? We hear about COVID. And I think he would say the same thing. Don't be troubled about it. We're in his hands. I don't think that we should run over here and hug somebody that we know's got it. That'd be tempting Jesus if we did that. But if we go about our daily doings and be cautious, don't worry. Well, I'd say we just shouldn't worry about death anyhow if we do the third part, if we stay ready. If it's our turn, we're going to go. It said, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, earthquakes in divers places. There'll be famines and troubles. These are the beginnings of sorrows. I remember, probably about 1959, 60, somewhere in there. I was sitting in Union High School, and we felt a tremor. It hit down, there's a fault line down around Rich Creek somewhere. And I remember that. And so that's kind of in diverse places. It seems to me like it's not supposed to be happening in Union. But we didn't let that worry us. But take heed to yourselves. They shall deliver you up to councils and in the synagogues. We personally haven't saw that but it's going on in the world today. But it said the gospel must be published among all nations. I really believe that all nations know about Christ now. I'm not sure how strong it is in each country, but they know about Christ. You know, there's people in China knows about Christ, and if they turn their life over to Christ openly, they will be murdered. And believe me, China has a big grip on this country. China has got secret agents in the rulership of this country. So don't look for things to get better. I'm sorry, but don't worry either. God's going to take care of it. And in the second part, it says, recognize the signs of Christ's return. Can't you see signs today that says the end is near? I mean, it's unimaginable, the things that happen. And you know, talk about families against families. Right now, it seems that we got about half of the United States against the other half. Yep. About half of this nation thinks different. And a lot of it has to do over the environment, is where we differ. And I've always said God put enough here on this earth for us to do us until He comes back, and He expects us to use it. But there's some that don't think so. So we go, actually, 13:12. I'm not going to read all this because I don't have time. And it right here, 12 says talking about brother shall be against brother, and father and son against, and parents against each other. That's happening today. A minor scale, but you look at some of the court cases that she likes to watch court TV. There's a lot of brothers against brothers, against their mothers. I mean, they're suing family against family, and that's what it says. You know, it says family will be against family, and they are. And it goes on to talk about us, ye. He's talking about the disciples, and we are disciples of Christ too. It says, ye shall be hated of all men for my sake. Now, when it says all men, it's not talking about us hating each other. It's talking about the outside world is going to hate the church. So we can't be deceived by thinking we're all going to hate each other. But it says, he that endureth, the same shall be saved. So we have to endure to the end. We can't go, if it's a mile, we can't go 99% of the way and get off track and expect to get the prize. We have to endure to the end. In talking about the abomination, desolation, I hope we don't get to see the great tribulation. We may get to go through part of it. But when it talks about the tribulation, I say 15 says, let him that's on the mountaintop not go down into the house, and talks about the two in the field plowing and different versions, different books here. But I think what it's saying, and I've never really heard it said that way, but yesterday I was looking at this. And I've wondered myself what it meant. It's two in the field plowing, and the ones on the house. You don't come down to go into the house and get anything, because what's happening is so catastrophic. You need to fear. You need to leave immediately. It's just like, say for instance, you just pulled into your house in your car, and somebody comes running out the door and says, "Bomb." You don't have time to go in and get anything. You need to move, get away from her. That's kind of how catastrophic this thing is going to happen. It is so drastic that you don't have time to go in and get your billfold. You don't have time to go in and get you some food to take with you. I mean, it's just how important it is if you want to save, if you don't want to die right there. So, it says, woe to them with child. Especially if it's in the winter, you know how cold it gets in the winter. And if you have a small child that you have to carry and you have to feed, and they can't go without food probably as long as we can. So you've got a responsibility to feed those children. That's why it says, pray that your flight be not in winter. And we're talking about tribulation. There's tribulation and there's great tribulation. I think sometimes we all go through what's considered a tribulation, just a real bad trial on your life, family trial maybe, a sickness, whatever. Because a tribulation doesn't necessarily have to be great tribulation that he's talking about. But it says, for in those days such affliction such as was never from the beginning of creation. All the things that we have read in this Bible about all the things that's come upon the world, nothing is as bad as what's coming. It says, such as was not from the beginning of creation, which God created unto this time, neither shall be. And it's going to be so bad that 20 says, except the Lord shortened those days, no flesh could be saved. But for the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he hath shortened the days. It says in the end times, the very elect will be deceived, could be deceived. But I think we can take some faith into this. It says, no flesh should be saved if he hadn't shortened the days, but for the elect's sake, he hath chosen. Who has he chosen? His elect are the chosen. He has shortened the days. And it didn't just say he's going to shorten the days for you. He's already got it on schedule. It's nothing he has to look after. It's already scheduled. You know, we like to sit down and make a schedule for the day or for the week, and we get off schedule sometimes. Things just happen. Martha, can you keep your bus on schedule 100% of the time? And we just can't do it. But when Jesus Christ schedules something, you can bet on it. You can take it to the bank. It says, if any man say to you, lo, he's here. Well, we done talked about that in the first part, in being deceived. It says, for false Christs and false prophets shall rise. And, you know, if we're not blind, we can see that we have already had false prophets come right through our area. Because if he gets up in the pulpit, it don't have to be in the pulpit. If he just gets up and says, this is going to happen, and it don't happen, the Word tells you he's a false prophet. And I've actually seen a guy come through here, not just one, but one especially, because he really stood out, because he not only made false prophets, but he started false churches, called people to preach that God didn't call. And he really brought a division to churches in the area. And he was a false prophet. Now, he wasn't good enough to show signs and wonders. And that's coming next. You know, if we're in a church and somebody gets healed, I'm talking about right in front of your eyes, we believe that's a man of God. That was God. But you know, in the end days, you're going to see those things happen, and it may not have been of God. So, we got to have God living in you to let you know what's His and what's not. Because just watching won't always do it. It says to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. And that's the ones that you might say living at the foot of the cross is what we call it. And then he says, take heed. I done told you. Now, watch. It says, but in those days after that tribulation, the sun. See, we're talking about, now we're getting back to talk about the great tribulation. That's when the sun is going to be darkened, the moon is not going to give its light, and the stars are going to fall from the sky. But up to this point, we have still been through tribulation. But it wasn't great tribulation. It was bad tribulation. And I'm sure we've all been through it. I've been through it more than once. But God brought us through. We've seen when the sun was an eclipse, you know, will hide the sun for a short while, but this is not going to be for a short while. I've often thought, what would I do if I woke up in the morning at 8 o'clock, had no power, no lights? It was supposed to be day, but it was dark. Would my flashlight burn? Even if the battery was up? I don't know. But that's going to happen someday. And for that reason, we need to go to the third part of the lesson this morning. Now, you have to realize that all this is being said, Jesus is just casually talking to his disciples. He had 4 of them, and they was having a private conversation with Jesus. You know, we can have a private conversation with Jesus and not be in his presence. We can be in his midst, but not in his presence. So, third part says, always be ready. So any of the things that we've talked about, if it happens, you know where you're going. The road has been paved. I don't know why we talk about the road to heaven, because the way to heaven is right up through the sky, you know. Mark 13:33 says, take heed, watch and pray, for ye know not when the time is. For the Son of Man is as a man taking a far journey, who left his house and gave authority to his servants and to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. Now, this is a whole lot like life. Everybody is not a neat housekeeper. That's a rumor I've been hearing, that everybody is not a neat housekeeper. But now, the ruler of this house is. It was spit shine when he left. And he put watchmen over it, and they are to take care of it and keep it spit shine, because they don't know when he's coming back. And that's the way it is with our life. We can't let it get messed up and junked up, and because we have to keep it prepared for his return. And so, I mean, he used examples that, see, he didn't use no big words here that the disciples didn't understand. He's telling them openly, like me talking to you. And 34 says, "Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh." And it's the way with Christ. At evening, midnight, or the cock crowing, which is somewhere around 5 o'clock probably, or in the morning, daylight comes. So, the people that's living in this mansion, I'll call it, and they're taken care of while the master's gone, they have to keep it clean completely, because they don't know when. And if he was to walk in and it was a mess, there would probably literally be heads flying, for being disobedient. And if we are disobedient with Christ, the results are not good. It says, 36 says, "Lest coming suddenly he finds you sleeping." Now, like I said, sometimes you might be in a messy house. Just lay down right in the middle of it and go to sleep. And that's all right if it's your house. But this is not my house. This is the temple of God. Everybody has one. So are you going to keep your temple swept and clean? Are you going to let it get messy, override your conscience, and just be comfortable where you're at? I mean, that's a fearful thing, to know that God could come back at any time and find us not ready. That's why it says, always be ready. And that goes from Mark 32 to 37. And what I say unto you, I say unto all. You see, he's talking to the disciples on a very casual situation. But he said, what I'm telling you all, it's for all. So you have to realize that it was written down for us. And it's still there today on the paper, it says. I say unto all, watch. So, you see, he wasn't talking to but the four. And, of course, by this time, he probably had some others had gathered around. I don't know, but I just know that's the ones he started out with. But they had to take that message and give it to the world to be watching. Those four, they were disciples. It was their job to carry the word of God. And us being disciples of Christ, we're not the kind of disciples they were. We in a sense, we're something like them, but these were hand-picked. He picked 12 of them. And, even Christ knew exactly what he was doing, and he had a evil one in the crowd. And that may have been for a purpose. Well, I know it was for a purpose because he had to go to the cross, and it just happened that Judas was picked for that job to turn him in, you know. But we're our disciples just like the rest of them, and we're to carry the word and to tell people to always be ready. And it doesn't really cost you anything to get ready. But now you will have to put some energy in to stay ready. You know, sanctification, being saved is a free gift of God. All you have to do is ask, and you'll receive salvation. But when you ask for salvation, then you took on a pretty good load. You took on a load that you're going to be obedient to God and all the things that he told us to do in this book. And it's a whole, you know, what they call, if I want to get a road map to go to Ohio, one page will tell me. You get in your atlas, one page will get you to Ohio. Well, this is in 66 books, you know. And there's a lot of instructions in here. And if I get a table and try to put it together, I don't look at the instructions until I go as far as I can go. Then I have to, where was that instructions? And take several screws out and start over again. We see, we have that same opportunity. We mess up along the way, but all we have to do is go back to him and start over again. It's not the end of the world if you fail doing something for Christ. Matter of fact, if you've never failed, you've never done much. We've all failed and come short of the glory of God. This book tells us that. So I think out of the three parts, you know, first being deceived, we have to watch for that. And the end times, we can see it's getting closer. But none of that will make any difference if we stay ready to meet Christ. So that's about all I got to say. I hope we got something out of it. The main topic is stay ready. So we'll hang around here a little bit, and Bobby will be back, and Martha will be with you next week. Thank you.